Now for global business updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Vimbai. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers across the world. We begin with the tragedy that took place in Baltimore with respect to the bridge collapse as a result of a cargo ship that hit the bridge. We understand that search and rescue has been suspended for now. Those 6 people, as you've already reported, still not found quite yet. But to talk about the economic disruption of this bridge collapsing, if you take a look at a map, you can see the ports of Baltimore and how I think it's to the right of your screen, the bridge. You can see how the Francis Bridge, yeah, looking at the Patasco River as it's called. And so coming from the south where that cargo ship hit the bridge, you can see the ports. Now, the ports is very, very important. And I think when we think about, how having, one major port in Nigeria has issues, with congestion and so on and so forth, the U.S. has a lot of ports. So looking at the metrics for 2023 for the port of Baltimore, it's about the 9th or 10th largest ports in the United States. If you're wondering, it's California has the largest ports. I think California, New York, New Jersey, and then even Long Beach, California again. So Los Angeles, I think. So it handles about, I think, an estimated 52 million tons of cargo worth about $80 billion or so. And you'll notice that it's according to the Maryland State Archives, it is the top roll-on, roll-off ports. So it is very important to the automobile industry, but it also handles commodities, coal and other things, fertilizers and other things, but it's very important. In fact, the CEO of Ford was speaking to the media yesterday saying that they would have to divert some of their cargo away from Baltimore and probably maybe go through New York, New Jersey or something. So there are disruptions in terms of, and if we've seen, the freight costs like that coming from Asia through to the US rising. There are issues. Of course, loss of life is, of course, the main issue here. Joe Biden has said that the US is going to rebuild that bridge. It was built back in 1977. There's been discussions around whether or not that bridge is supposed to be able to withstand, modern day bridges to be able to withstand a collision from a cargo ship. And by the way, we understand that the crew on that cargo ship, which I think is linked to Maersk, they outsourced it to a Singaporean company or so. But they said they made a dispatch call, a mayday call to the bridge operators that allowed them to close down the entrance and exit of the bridge, saying that, hey, listen, we're losing control or whatever it is, and there's possibly could be a collision. So apparently that mayday call allowed them to act quickly and shut off the bridge, which, if not for that, probably the catastrophe would, in terms of loss of life, there's only 6 people they are accounting for that are saying that they are missing. It could have been way more than that. So it's going to be a long rebuilding effort, but in the meantime, which is why it's good to have port diversification in your country, whereby if one goes down, you can divert to others. So as far as the East Coast is concerned, I think they're mostly going to be going to New York, New Jersey, the tri-state area. We move from that to Donald Trump. This is very interesting news here. His Trump Technology Media Company finally, after about 29, almost 30 months, finally went public yesterday. And it had a big debut, and there was so much news about how Donald Trump is now worth $6.57 billion as a result of this company. So what it is that the company merged with what's called a SPAC, a special purpose acquisition company, and those are shell companies whose purpose is a merger, asset allocation, acquisition, and possibly eventual listing on the exchange. So it's listed on the NASDAQ. So Trump has about 60% of the shares. The board is filled with people that he's friendly with, and so on and so forth. And the debut was big. It was making a lot of headlines. It climbed as much as 50% to about almost $79 a share. But then it came down later to about, I think about $56 or $57. So in the end, it was only a 16% pop. But the thing about this stock is that the company is being valued at $11 billion, right? And in terms of revenue, the first 9 months of 2023, Revenues was only about $3 million. If you annualize, it probably comes out to about $4.55 million. Losses, though, was about almost $50 million. So there are no fundamentals that justify an $11 billion valuation. In fact, if you compare it to Reddit, so we talked about the Reddit IPO last week. Reddit is being valued at about $6.47 billion. Reddit had $800 million in revenue in 2023, which is what, 160 something, how many more times higher than the Trump this year. In fact, Trump's, this company, this is a media tech company, mostly based on Truth Social, which is the social media company that platform that Trump started after he was kicked off Twitter, Meta, and so on and so forth. It actually lost about 30% of its users last month. So there's a quote from an economist, Jay Ritter. He's, I think, at the Warrington School of Business at the University of Florida. And if you take a look at what he said, he says the underlying business doesn't seem to be worth much. There's no evidence that this is going to become a large, highly profitable company. I'm reasonably confident the stock price will eventually drop to $2 a share. He even said it could fall beyond that. Now, the question is this. Trump, of course, has legal issues. You know that fraud case that he lost, he got a judgment. The judgment was against him, the civil fraud case brought by the state of New York, the Attorney General in New York. He was found liable for inflating his assets, and he's supposed to be liable for about $500 and something million. He was ordered to pay about $400 million in a bond. He didn't have the money. No bond company wanted to come up with the. They didn't want to use any of the collateral from him because of issues with real estate and so on and so forth. They brought it down to $175 million. A lot of people incorrectly think that because of the big valuation of this media company, that Trump can somehow tap into the money because he owns 60% of the shares, and he can now use that to pay for his legal fees. He can't. There's a lock-in period where about 6 months he cannot access or sell any shares at all. And if he does, he might actually be open to lawsuits. But by the way, the board can allow him to do so if they so choose, because again, he's got friends there. But if he does that and accesses the money early, the stock price is going to fall. So anyway, watch this, right? Let's mark today. It closed at $57 a share. Watch what happens. The fundamentals just do not support the $11 billion valuation for this company. Finally, the CBN, of course, it was a rate hike. Again, there were good arguments for a hold, but as I said yesterday with the Central Bank of Nigeria, and as the governors of the Central Bank said yesterday, it was about inflation, and trying to narrow that gap for real interest rates between your MPR and where inflation is going. The next meeting is in May. If they had held yesterday, you would have to wait for March inflation figures and April inflation figures before you get to the May 2021 MPC meeting, by which time inflation could possibly have accelerated. We had a couple analysts, one economist, one analyst on the Global Business Report. They see inflation climbing to 33% in headline inflation in March. So I think the CBN, the MPC was looking at trying to make sure that was in place. So that was pretty much all they moved. Well, they did move the asymmetric corridor. +1, it was +100, -700 prior. They moved it to +100, back to +100, -300 basis points. Everything else was kept in place. The cash reserve ratio at 45% for commercial banks, cash reserve ratio for merchant banks at 14%, your liquidity ratio left at 30%. During the press conference, the fertilizer matter came up again. No problem. The journalists were asking the governor to clarify once more. Here's what he said on that fertilizer in the Ministry of Agriculture.
The fertilizer that was given out was the residue of an intervention that had been done before we came into office. It was not something that was done directly by us. And the options were either to leave them there to rot away or to give them to those that we believed had the capacity to distribute. And that is exactly what we did with the handing over to the Ministry of Agriculture. In actual fact, the way I see it is that we've taken those particular merchandise and put it where it rightly belongs.
All right, it's been a week of Africa central banks. Up next is South Africa. Again, it's predicted there will be a hold, so we'll see what happens. We'll talk about that tomorrow.
Rotus, so
Yesterday, I think pretty much both of us agreed on the fact that they were going to raise rates, and there was no way because of the real rates of return. And that came in. I mean, I know the argument a lot of other people are making as regards productivity in the economy is going to be difficult to get money. But also, apart from the real rate of returns, we also have a big, money circulation problem that needs to be nipped in the bud. We need to take that hot hair out of that money. I think if I was at the meeting, the MPC meeting, what I will ask the CBN governor is, he should not just tell us is the residue of the fertilizer. He should give us an audit of what fertilizers they met on ground. That was an audit of some of the things that they met on ground from that last intervention program, which they, before now, had hitherto claimed that, no, they made me feel it did not do anything and all of that. They should give us a concise audit of the fertilizer, of the rice, and other things. Because they are the ones that are quick to say in the papers that they want to probe the last one. So all of a sudden now, the same person you say you want to probe, all of a sudden now you are saying the person left fertilizer behind. So give us an audit and all of that. And Rotus, is it today you know that Trump has been doing business that has no fundamentals? Is it today you know? Why are you trying to rationalize Trump? All of this is a hot air smoke screen. Is it today you know that Trump used to call newspaper in the back and prop up his valuation of his business? Is it today? Is it today that Trump went to the market? I think since that market in the 90s to prop up the value of his casino and co that we saw to be hot air and a scam and a dangbana in the end. My brother, don't waste your time. It's Trump now. We know the kind of business he does.
Speaking about that, Trump hotels and casino resorts. So he went public with it for $14 per share, right? It never ever made a profit. But guess what? He earned $44 million as a salary from it. It never made a profit. And then over a decade later, he filed for bankruptcy, cashed out for $1 billion. So he clearly has a business model that works for him. He needs liquidity and it works for him. It serves his purpose. He doesn't need to make a profit. He just needs to get that money out. It's campaign season. It's election season. Clearly, America isn't that different to Africa when it comes to the need for cash when it's election time. Given how he's, just because he's Trump, it's not as easy this time for him to fundraise as it would have been for the first time. So he's getting creative. And listen, you can't knock a man's hustle. He's doing what he needs to do.
Okay, I guess the key story about Donald Trump is that this is not going to have any effect one way or the other on the legal penalties that he's dealing with. And you already made that point. The market valuation after, his company showed up, his social media company showed up, was 9 billion. It's Reddit, that is 11 billion. And whereas he owns about 5 billion of that, in case he decides to offload his, his stock, he will have a lot of money on his hands, but he cannot because that has been locked. And even if he goes ahead to say he's going to sell his stake, that would just crash the stock price. So it's not as if he has any real advantage. That's where the problem is. So he still has to deal with his legal penalties and find a way around that. Now, as for the Port of Baltimore, by the way, the Port of Baltimore, is a leading port for trucks, for, automobiles, particularly many of the tokumbos. Maybe if many Nigerians check their vehicles, they will probably know that it came through that port of Baltimore. So it's a very important development even to Nigerians. But the thing is, look, traffic is already being diverted. Logistics companies are already saying the Port of Baltimore is going to be shut down for 1 month or even for much longer. And so there will be pressure on other ports within the eastern coast, particularly New Jersey, and also, other ports, Norfolk, Southeast, in that area. So this will drive up cost. It will put pressure on everybody. And then, of course, the bridge will no longer be available on the I-695, the Interstate 695 for traffic. So this is the effect of this. But there's also intermodal transportation in the U.S. So coal, will also be affected because the Port of Baltimore, also is used for other purposes, including the transportation of coal. So this is the thing about international trade. Once there is a glitch, everybody pays for it. Now to talk about what happened with the MPC, where the analysis is that it has implications for all of us, not just for businesses, also for individuals. If you want to borrow money, the cost will be higher. If they were lending money at 29%, 35% before, it will go up now to about 40% if the MPR is at 24.75%. And this is what Dele Oye, the president of NASIMA, has been saying, that look, this will restrict access to credit. This will make life impossible for the private sector and for small-scale businesses. Spending will be reduced. But the focus of the CBN is simply that they are interested in managing the Naira, the volatility of which they've been able to reduce, and also the foreign exchange. But as I asked yesterday, will this in the long run benefit the ordinary man? Now, the CBN governor made a point yesterday that, look, this may not be for a very long time. That if there is improvement with inflation and foreign exchange, then of course they will review the MPR downwards. If they do so with food inflation at over 37%, would food inflation go down? Because in Nigeria, part of the problem we have is that when things go up, they don't come down. Will they reduce the cost of a loaf of bread? Or will the price of a bowl of pepper soup come down? Everything has gone up. So if the CBN governor can reassure the Nigerian people that, look, when things go down with the monetary policy, things will also go down with food inflation, that would then be reassuring. He talked about the fertilizer. I think he has clarified that. So maybe we just leave that. But he also talked about the recapitalization of the banks and the move towards the $1 trillion economy. My concern is, where are we with this recapitalization? If this recapitalization goes through with the details that have been provided, will some banks survive? Will some banks merge? Will some banks disappear? That again is the question. And what will be the implications?
Right. Thank you so much for that, Rotus Oddiri.